Rest easy, little one. We'll be all right.
They still talk about that winter, the one that came early, sharp as broken glass. Frost crept down from the mountains before the wheat was cut, before the rivers gave up their songs. Even the coyotes had gone quiet, and in their silence, the world felt older than God. I was 28 then, a man the town liked to call Gentle Boone. Some said it kindly. Most didn't. They laughed soft when I passed, like I couldn't hear. Maybe they were right. Maybe gentleness don't belong in a land built on bones and gun smoke. That night, the moon was bright enough to read by. I'd been mending fence on the north side of my property, 50 acres of cold loneliness wrapped in barbed wire and wind. The cattle were restless, the kind of nervous that means a storm's thinking about visiting. I remember humming a hymn my mother used to sing, the words ghosting out of me like breath in the cold. Then I saw her. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, a shadow slumped near the fence line, tangled in frost and sagebrush. But the closer I rode, the more the shape turned human. A woman. She was curled in the dirt like something the earth hadn't decided to keep. Bare feet blue with cold. Long black hair half covered in snow. Her hands were clutching a small leather pouch tight against her chest, like a child might hold onto a secret. I slid off my horse and knelt beside her. Her skin was ash pale, her lips cracked, whispering sounds that weren't English. Maybe prayers. Maybe goodbyes. I didn't think. I just moved. Pulled off my sheepskin jacket, the one my father left me before he died, the one that still smelled faintly of pipe smoke and cedar. When I laid it over her shoulders, she flinched first, then went still. Her eyes fluttered open, dark, deep, and watching me like I was a question she didn't know how to answer. "Easy," I whispered. "You're safe." She didn't understand. But something in her face softened, as if the warmth had reminded her that she was still human. The snow started again, soft flakes that caught in her hair and on my lashes. The world turned silent, just wind, horse, and two souls that didn't belong to each other but shared that piece of night anyway. I lifted her as gently as I could, laid her near a mesquite bush that broke the wind, built a small fire from the dry brush in my saddlebag. She tried to rise once, murmuring words that sounded like, "No, can't." But she was too weak. So I left her the fire, my jacket, and a strip of dried venison. Then I turned away. I didn't dare take her home, not in that town. They'd have burned the barn before letting an Apache sleep under a white man's roof. As I rode back through the silver fields, something twisted inside me. Guilt, maybe. Or fear. I'd done a kind thing in a cruel place, and kindness was a kind of confession here. The next morning, the saloon was full of voices before sunrise. They were always quick to sniff out other people's business, those men, hard hands, harder eyes. "Boone gave his coat to an Indian girl," one said between laughs. "Virgin Samaritan," another added. "You sure it was mercy he was after?" Sheriff Dugan leaned against the counter, his badge catching light like an insult. "They'll come for him now," he said. "You don't touch Apache women. That's the law of the hills, and it's older than any court." I kept quiet, sipping black coffee that tasted like tin. Clara May, the widow who ran the boarding house, put a hand on my arm when I stood to leave. "You're too kind for this land, Elijah," she said softly. "Too kind or too foolish. Can't tell which yet." "Neither," I said, but I wasn't sure I believed it. Outside, the world was gray and soundless. Snow had crusted over the troughs, the cattle bawling for feed. I spent the day mending what fences I could, the hammer ringing against frozen wire, a sound lonely enough to make a man ache. Every strike brought her face back, her eyes, the frost caught in her lashes, the way she breathed when warmth found her. I tried not to imagine her dead. Tried harder not to imagine her alive, out there alone. That night, I couldn't sleep. The roof creaked under snow's weight, the fire in the stove hissed like it knew secrets. I stared at my empty coat hook and felt the cold creeping in around my heart. By morning, I'd made up my mind. The frost was thick enough to bite through boots when I saddled up. I rode back to the place I'd found her. The land was untouched except for the faintest trail of footprints, small, light, leading east into the hills. She'd lived. I dismounted and knelt in the snow, tracing the shallow indent where her body had lain. The earth still seemed warm there somehow, as if the night hadn't fully let her go. A raven called from the fence post, black against the white, and the sound echoed longer than it should have. I looked toward the mountains. The sky was the color of pewter, the sun thin and cold as a dime. Somewhere out there, she was walking, wrapped in my father's jacket, carrying that little pouch like it held the world. And I felt something inside me shift, a small, bright ache I didn't have a name for. I turned my horse toward home, but my heart didn't follow. That evening, I found Sheriff Dugan waiting at my gate. His horse pawed the frozen dirt, snorting steam. "You've done it now," he said. "What's that supposed to mean?" He spat into the snow, the sound sharp as a gun click. "They found tracks near the ridge. Apache scouts. Word is, they're lookin' for someone. You best hope it ain't her." He leaned closer, the whiskey in his breath hot and mean. "You want my advice? You forget that girl. You forget where she fell, and you pray they forget you." He rode off before I could answer, leaving hoofprints like punctuation marks in the snow. I stood there a long while after he was gone, watching the horizon where the hills met the dying light. The world had gone still again. Only the wind moved, whispering through the grass, soft, sad, almost human. "In this land," my father used to say, "mercy's a bruise you keep hidden. But it's still mercy." That night, I sat on the porch with my rifle across my knees and the stars cold above me. The silence wasn't peaceful anymore. It was waiting. And I had no way of knowing what it was waiting for. Morning came gray and slow, crawling over the plains like something wounded. The frost hadn't lifted, and neither had the unease. I was mending a gate when the air changed, a kind of hush that doesn't belong to weather. Then I saw it. At first, just dust, rising like ghosts at the far edge of my land. Then shapes. Horses. Riders. More than 100, no, 200 maybe, moving in silence so complete it made the world feel hollow. I set down my hammer. The gate creaked once, the sound swallowed by distance. They came closer, and I could see the feathers, the painted faces, the glint of metal in the sun. Apache warriors, line after line, their shadows long against the frozen ground. For a moment, I thought I was dreaming. Then I felt my heart thump once, heavy enough to make my chest hurt. They stopped at my fence. 200 riders in perfect stillness. Not a word. Not a breath wasted. Just eyes. Eyes that burned with something too deep to name. Then one rider broke from the line, tall, grave, wrapped in furs and age. His hair was streaked white. His presence bent the air itself. Chief Dakota. And beside him, on a chestnut horse, wrapped in my sheepskin jacket, was her. The woman from the snow. Naya. She looked different in daylight. Strength in her shoulders now, warmth in her cheeks. But those eyes still carried winter in them. Chief Dakota raised his hand, palm out, like the land itself was answering him. I took off my hat, heart pounding, voice somewhere between fear and prayer. "I mean no harm," I said. "I didn't." He cut me off with a single word. "Speak." "I found her freezing by my fence," I said, every syllable shaking. "She would have died. I gave her my coat. That's all." The warriors didn't move. Even the horses seemed carved from silence. Then, over the ridge, came more hoofbeats, rough, loud, clumsy. Sheriff Dugan and 5 men from town, rifles gleaming like lies in the sun. Dugan spat as he reined in his horse. "Told you they'd come," he said, sneering. "You gone and started a war, Boone." He raised his rifle a little too easily. The movement made the nearest warrior tighten his grip on his spear. The whole world balanced on that single heartbeat. Chief Dakota looked at me again. His voice was deep, like stone rolling down a mountain. "You touched her." The words felt like a trial. "I saved her," I said softly. "That's all." Then Naya dismounted. Her bare feet touched the earth without fear. She walked past 200 armed men, past me, until she stood in the middle of the fence line. The air shimmered around her like heat, though the day was cold. She reached out, slow, deliberate, and placed her hand on my chest. A whisper went through the warriors like wind through grass. Chief Dakota blinked once, long and thoughtful. "She says," he murmured, his English rough. "You are the man who gave her life." Dugan barked out a laugh. "Life? He gave her a coat, that's what." He spat again, this time at the ground near Naya's feet. Before I could speak, one of the younger warriors moved, bow drawn, arrow aimed. "Nobody moves!" I shouted, stepping forward. "Put it down," Dugan snapped. "Sheriff," I said quietly, "go home." He glared at me, lip curling. "You siding with them now?" "I'm siding with what's right." Something in my voice must have carried further than I knew, because the young warrior lowered his bow. Chief Tekoda's expression softened, almost imperceptibly. He spoke again. "You are alone. No tribe, no wife, no brothers. Yet you gave warmth. Why?" I swallowed. "Because she was cold." The words hung there, simple, small, but truer than anything I'd said in years. Tekoda dismounted, the ground trembling under his boots. He reached into his saddlebag, drew out a wooden pipe, and lit it. The smoke curled up between us, gray against the blue sky. He took one slow draw, then handed it toward me. "Then we eat," he said. "No blood today." That night, the plains glowed with the orange breath of campfires. The warriors stayed near the fence, their laughter low and rhythmic, blending with the coyotes' cries. I sat awkwardly beside the fire, Naya across from me, her face flickering with light and shadow. They gave me venison stew thick with herbs I couldn't name. I offered coffee from my kettle, and they took it like it was gold. We didn't share words, just quiet glances, small nods, and a kind of peace that felt borrowed. After a while, Naya spoke. Her voice was low, shaped by the wind. "You did not run when they came." "Wouldn't have helped much," I said with a half-smile. She tilted her head. "You have fear in you, but it does not lead you." I didn't know how to answer that. She reached into her pouch, the same one she'd clung to that night, and pulled out a single feather, black and white, worn at the edges. "This belonged to my brother," she said. "He died in the last war between your people and mine. I kept it because I thought there were no men with mercy left among you." She held it out to me. "For your kindness." I hesitated. "I can't." "It already belongs to you," she said simply. The feather felt lighter than air in my hand. I slipped it into my hatband. For the first time in years, the weight on my heart eased a little. Later, when most had drifted to sleep, I found Naya sitting alone, humming. A song like water finding its way between stones. She looked up when I approached. "My people think," she said softly, "kindness makes you weak. That it gets you killed." I smiled faintly. "My people think the same." Her laughter, quiet, almost shy, cracked something open inside me. We sat in silence after that, the fire dying to embers. Above us, stars spilled across the sky, endless, cold, and beautiful. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled, and she turned her face toward the sound, eyes glinting. "Do you believe in spirits?" she asked. "I believe in mercy," I said. "Seems close enough." She nodded, thoughtful, like she'd just been handed a secret worth keeping. When dawn broke, the fires had burned to smoke. Chief Tekoda stood by his horse, watching me. "You gave life," he said. "So you are under our watch now." I nodded. "And if your watch brings trouble?" He smiled, faintly, the kind of smile that doesn't reach the mouth but fills the eyes. "Then trouble will learn peace." He mounted his horse and gave a single nod to Naya. She looked at me once more, not a goodbye, not yet, then followed him into the horizon. When the dust settled and silence came back, I stood at that fence for a long time, the feather still tucked in my hat, the world brighter somehow. The air smelled of smoke, coffee, and something new, something like belonging. And though I didn't know it yet, mercy had drawn a line across this land, one that would soon be tested and paid for in fire. The snows melted slow that spring, reluctant as old sorrow. For a while, life went on as if nothing had changed. The cattle bawled, the wind came down from the ridge, the townsfolk whispered when I passed. But sometimes, in the hush between chores, I'd see movement along the far hills, a glint of sunlight on metal, a rider's shadow keeping its distance. I knew then that Chief Tekoda's word was true. They were watching. And she was near. One afternoon, weeks later, I was out by the creek mending a water trough when I heard the sound. Horses, fast and wild. Not tribal riders this time. Men from town. When I turned, Sheriff Dugan was leading them, red-faced, drunk, his rifle slung low but ready. Behind him, 5 others rode hard, dust rising behind them like ghosts stirred awake. "Boone," he barked, reining up shop. "You got Apache tracks all over your damn land again." "I ain't seen anyone," I said. He grinned, teeth yellow as old bone. "Yeah. Maybe they're hiding under that Mercy of yours." The men laughed, mean and hollow. Dugan spat. "We're going to drive them out tonight. You in, or you staying on their side of the fence?" I set down my tools slow. "You fire 1 shot," I said, "and you'll light something you can't put out." He sneered. "You threatening the law?" "No," I said. "I'm warning a fool." Something flickered in his eyes. Hate, mostly, the kind that doesn't burn quick but smolders for years waiting for a spark. He swung down off his horse, pulled his rifle free, and pointed it at my chest. "You forget who runs this land." Before I could answer, the air shifted. The hair on my arms rose. Then came the sound, distant at first, like a river made of thunder. Hooves. 200 again. Maybe more. They appeared over the ridge in perfect silence, sunlight glinting off spearheads, the sound of the earth trembling beneath them. Chief Dakota at the front. And Naya beside him, wrapped in the same sheepskin coat she'd once nearly died in. Dugan turned, curse caught in his throat. "Son of a—" He raised his rifle, fired. The shot cracked through the valley like lightning tearing open the sky. A warrior's horse reared, and the air exploded with noise, shouting, gunfire, the raw sound of fear. I didn't think. I ran. I hit Dugan hard, the rifle spinning from his hand. We went down in the mud, his fist cracking against my jaw, mine against his teeth. He grabbed for his sidearm. I knocked it loose. "You'll start a war," I shouted. He spat blood. "It's already here." Another shot rang out. A bullet split the air beside us. The smell of gunpowder stung my nose. Then I saw Naya, standing between the 2 sides, her hands raised, her voice cutting through the chaos. She wasn't shouting. She didn't need to. Her voice carried like wind over stone, steady, fierce, alive. Dakota's hand went up. One by one, his warriors stopped. The silence returned, heavier than before. I stood, chest heaving, mud on my face and blood on my lip. Dugan stayed down, groaning. The space between both sides was just dirt and dust and the memory of everything this land had already taken. Naya walked toward me, slow and sure. The morning light hit her hair, turning it to threads of gold and black. When she reached me, she looked at my hands, still clenched, still shaking, and said quietly, "You stand where others kneel. That is how peace begins." I didn't have words. Only breath. Only the sound of the wind carrying her voice somewhere higher than either of us. Dakota rode forward then, his face unreadable. He looked at Dugan, bleeding, humiliated, then at me. "You stopped the fire," he said. "Didn't feel like stopping," I answered. He gave a nod. Still, the flame obeyed. He dismounted, took the coat from his saddle, and held it out. The jacket, my father's, had been mended, lined with soft deerskin, stitched with turquoise beads and a single feather sewn into the collar. "Your gift returned," he said. "It carries 2 hearts now." I took it, the leather warm from his hands, and felt something shift deep inside me. Not pride, not victory. Just stillness. Naya smiled faintly, a sadness and a promise both. Then, as the warriors turned to leave, she touched the edge of my coat and whispered, "When winter comes again, remember, mercy keeps." They rode away slow, dust curling up like incense behind them. The land fell quiet except for the sound of wind through the fence wires, a song older than any church. Dugan's men scattered, leaving their rifles in the dirt. The sheriff himself limped off without a word. He'd learned what fear really looks like, and it didn't carry a gun. I stood there alone a long time after, the sun climbing high, the jacket heavy on my shoulders but not cold anymore. That night, I sat on the porch, the feather she'd given me resting in my hand. The stars came out one by one, slow as forgiveness. And I thought about the way her hand had felt against my chest that first night, trembling, alive, grateful. About how something so small could echo this long. Years later, when I was old and gray and my hands shook from the cold, I'd still wake sometimes to that same sound, hooves in the distance. I knew it wasn't real, but I'd step outside anyway, just to see. Sometimes the horizon would shimmer with heat, and I'd swear I saw riders out there, shadows against the dawn, watching still. Maybe it was memory. Maybe it was mercy keeping its promise. On my cabin wall hangs that same coat, patched, faded, and whole. And beneath it, in a wooden frame, a single feather. They say a man's worth is measured by what he stands for. I reckon that's true. But sometimes, it's measured by what he stands still for, the moments when the world tells him to hate, and he chooses grace instead. The wind moved through the grass outside, soft and endless. I closed my eyes, and the world felt small again, like that night under the moon, when kindness was all I had to give, and somehow it was enough. Maybe mercy don't come back the way you expect, I whisper to the empty fields. Maybe it rides in with 1,000 hooves or just one smile. But it always comes, and it always knows who deserves it. And under that vast western sky, where truth still stands tall, the wind carries her name. Naya.